Hello and welcome back to Grumpy Jews Who Read.
Old Jews.
Oh, well, no, we're only old, relatively speaking. As Sadie would say, so we had a very interesting argument with Sadie, your granddaughter. So I'm Jonathan, and we're with
I'm
Marty,
Marty.
who happens to be my mother, and we're talking about Sadie, who turned to me and her mother, Ginny, the other day, and said, "You are so old." To
And then
to the
I
two of us.
think, what does she think about me? And
Well,
she,
actually, she doesn't think you're so old.
that's
It's
right.
very
In
interesting.
comparison to her father, I'm young. So go
Right.
figure.
Go figure. So I made an argument to her that she doesn't buy at all. I said to her that at some point that we are as old as we will ever be in comparison to you now, and we will only seem younger to you, relatively speaking, as you get older. And she said, I don't buy it for a minute. So,
Okay. So
so
we,
we didn't introduce ourselves about in episode one. This is episode two. Is we didn't talk about football,
and it,
and
and I want to say it is complicated because we both love football, but we also really hate the fact that people get hurt so much.
so this is true. And thank you for reminding me of that because truly, I can't, in good conscience, be a football fan. It's like liking gladiators.
That's right.
It's horrendous. So I have a
Yeah.
problem with that.
But I watch it constantly, more than
And
one day a week.
especially now that there are Thursday night and Monday night
Monday
games
night, Thursday night. I mean,
and in the playoffs
I
Saturdays.
don't give up Grey's Anatomy for Thursday night, especially when the Jets are really looking awful. So, I mean,
Well,
they started out.
so what what I wanted to talk about briefly is to introduce us as football fans is the funny thing about our origin story as football fans and memory. So in my memory, which is wrong by the way, but this is how I remember it. In my memory, our the first football game I really remember watching with you was in 1981 at the apartment on 86th Street and East End, between East End and York, 535 East 86th Street. It was it was the Super Bowl between the Raiders and the Eagles.
Remember that.
But I remember Marcus Allen's awesome reverse, this amazing run. And and Jim Plunkett was the quarterback. And I remember you talking about Jim Plunkett, and you saw Jim Plunkett play at Dartmouth. You
Okay.
saw him play in college, and you mentioned that when we were watching him in the Super Bowl in 1981. But the real funny thing about all of this is I totally misremembered the Marcus Allen run. The Marcus Allen run was in the 1984 Super Bowl. I looked it up versus the Raiders versus the Redskins.
Okay.
So,
This is more than I want to even think about. This is
but
getting bad. It's too many coaches.
tell me about the coaches on the New York Jets.
Well, there are too many of them, and they introduced a new one on Thursday night. And I don't even remember the name of that coach. He was some kind of coach. He wasn't the offense coordinator. He wasn't the defensive coordinator. He wasn't the coach. He was another coach.
He
And
wasn't offensive line or defensive line. He
no,
wasn't special teams.
he had another, no, he had another name because I know coaches. And I turned to your stepfather and I said, "What's this?" He said, "I never heard of it." I said, "Well, this is getting like our synagogue with rabbis." I said, "This is a minion of coaches." And
So,
well, our,
so
our,
for
our synagogue has a lot of rabbis. We
so
have
for those of you who
rabbis.
don't know this lingo, a little Jewish lingo, a minyan is the prayer quorum that's required to do some things in prayer in Judaism, and it's 10 people. And the whole
Well,
idea that Central Synagogue is so big that it has a minyan of rabbis, which it
it does.
does,
It does.
but it's
Now
very
it does.
funny. But
Yes.
now you can have a minion of coaches, which means on any given NFL team, if all your coaches are Jewish, you can say Mourner's Kaddish altogether.
That's
But
right.
in any event,
So I think because I'm worried about remembering books and I'm making notes about lots of books. The current book today, I think we should just give honorable mention to Mona's Eyes.
Okay, well, tell us about Mona's Eyes.
Okay. And it just was announced this week that Barnes and Noble named it the #1 book of the year. And it certainly hasn't gotten the press of the book that just won um, the Booker, which is a book called Flesh,
Right.
um, and which I will read, even though my other choice was not, which is another story.
Well,
But
let's complain about the Booker Prize selection committee who don't select the books that you think are good.
well, I read all 6 of them last year, all 6 of the finalists. The Booker Prize people actually read 34. And if you want to read an interesting article, Sarah Jessica Parker is one of the
I
judges.
I saw that.
And
I
it's
saw
a
that.
great article, and she's great. She gave up lots of family time to read the 34 books that she had to read in 10 weeks. And that's even a lot for me. So I just
Yeah,
want to know that
three books a week is
a lot.
a lot of books.
So, Mona's Eyes is by an author named Thomas Schlesser, and he is an art historian, and he runs a an art. Um, he's the director of the Hartung Bergman Foundation in Antibes, France, where I just was a few weeks ago, and he teaches art history in Paris. So he wrote this book, and I just think anybody who's interested in art and interested in art history should take a look at this book. But you need
So I think what the concept is really I haven't read the book yet. You've recommended it to us,
little
and you
girl.
recommended it to your granddaughter because the way we view art when we go to Paris is like you know an express train,
That,
and
that's right.
you go through the Louvre and you try to see everything, but there's no way to see the Louvre.
No way. You can't do it at the Metropolitan Museum in New York or the Art Museum in Philadelphia. You can't do that. And this tells you not to do that. Okay.
Right. And I remember growing up in New York and having access to the Met and going and becoming familiar with different sections of the Met over time and visiting things that I wanted to see again
Right.
and again. And what this author offers is that with regard to art in Paris, right? The
So
idea that you could go and you could just spend some time once a week with one piece of art.
one piece of art. So Mona is the grandchild of this man who is the ultimate art historian and intellectual. He seems to know everything about writing and music and art and history. And he is very devoted to this granddaughter who's 10. And in the course of the book, she becomes 11. And she has a blackout where she loses her eyesight for an hour. And it is very upsetting to the family. And she's seeing a lot of doctors. And her sight comes back, but he's frightened that she will lose her eyesight. So he makes an arrangement. She's supposed to be seeing a psychiatrist every week to deal with the possibility of losing her eyes. He doesn't want her to do that. He wants her to see art and have memories. So he makes a deal with the parents, his daughter and son in law, that he will take Mona to the therapist every Wednesday. But that's a lie. So he doesn't take her to the therapist. He takes Mona to the Louvre for any number of weeks, to the d'Orsay for more weeks, and to the Pompidou for other. And in that course of a year, each Wednesday they see one piece of art. So it is a book of 52 chapters and 52 pieces of art. And every chapter starts with a little discussion, a paragraph or a page about what Mona's doing, and then they proceed to the museum. And he tells her on the first piece of art, which was a Botticelli in the Louvre, that you must stand in front of the piece of art for at least 10 minutes. And she stands. By the end of the book, and I have about 60 pages left in a 450-page book, by the end of the book, she has stood as long as an hour. And at one point, one of the security guards, and I think it's in the Pompidou, where she stood in front of this piece of modern art that doesn't really say much. He thought that they were going to steal it, and he asked them to move on. Nobody stands in front of this. So after she stands and concentrates, he then, her grandpa, gives her a précis about that piece of art. And then there is exactly the same amount of pages, about 2.5 to 4.5 pages, a piece of art that they have a discussion.
So what's really interesting, and I like this very much, is the order is the opposite of the way we often look at art when we're running through museums. Often we will look at the description of the art in the text and then look at the piece of art.
That's
Like
true.
we're looking to see what's important about the art before we look at
Oh,
the
and
art.
she is
And
coming up with things that are just amazing. She's
and
also an extraordinary child, but
and I think what the author and what art historians would tell us is don't look at anything except the piece of the art first. Make up your own mind about what's important about the art before you find out what somebody else thinks.
and you were spot on because that is exactly what her grandpa wants, her daddy. And it is extraordinary. Now, I have had the longest time, this book is taking me more than a week because I'm looking at the pictures. Then I am reading his descriptions, and then I am getting the picture on my computer, not all 52, but looking at it. It is worth people's time.
And this is, you know, one of the blessings I have of being married to an artist is that what Ginny taught me very early on is that we don't actually do a very good job looking at the world and seeing what's there. We more often than not see what we are told to see. So we grow up drawing pictures of grass that is green and trees that are brown and leaves that are green and sky that is blue. And we then think that those things are those colors.
Well, and
And
then she is introduced to Cezanne and Picasso and Van Gogh, and all bets are off.
right, because it turns out that if you really look at the sky, sometimes the sky is red
Yeah.
and sometimes it's purple. And if you
Yeah.
really look at trees, very seldomly are tree trunks brown. They're usually grayish and yellowish, and there are all sorts of colors in them. And the grass is only green for some seasons. And so all of these things are a reminder that what artists are in fact asking us to do is look at things as we see them, not as we are told they look. And to
And
look at
Mona,
art
and
as
Mona
we see it
is
is very
very much
important.
in that place. And so I think, I think I'm proud of Barnes and Noble, which is a large bookstore chain that sells a
Is there
lot of,
any other large bookstore chain anymore?
not really, not really.
It is the
But
large bookstore chain aside from Walmart.
right. And but that they decided to make this the number one book on their list for 2025 when there are a lot of books in 2025 that are very good, many that I want to read that are on my list that I haven't. The So anyway, I wanted to open that up because it's a beautiful book. And of course, I would never ever suggest if anyone read a book that isn't written well. On top of this, it is written beautifully, and it's a joy to read, and I'll be sad when I finish it, which is very soon.
Since we're talking about memory,
Okay,
and we were talking about the difference between remembering a book that you're reading now versus a book that we read a long time ago.
right.
And there and I want to introduce one of the authors that you introduced, that I think Ginny introduced, or did you introduce us to? Who introduced us to Dorothy Dunnett? I think it was Ginny who found Dorothy Dunnett
Oh
first.
yes, definitely Ginny, and it
So,
destroyed my life for a number of months.
so for those of you who have never read Dorothy Dunnett has written two astounding series. And is Dorothy Dunnett still alive? She may not
No,
be.
I went to see her at a Barnes and Noble many years ago, and she died shortly after that.
So
Um,
two
I,
masterful series, one the Niccolo series, and one the Lyman.
I read them in reverse. I think you have to read. Let me just grab a copy of the book. I think you have to read the Niccolo first. Okay. The first of the House of Niccolo is Niccolo Rising.
The House of Nicola books fall into this beautiful genre of uh, and period historical fiction, tracing the creation of the market economy. Niccolo is, and there are a couple of other books that do this. Neil Stevenson does a similar thing with the time period in his books called Quicksilver and
All
the
right.
and but these books looking at the creation of credit, the creation of modern markets, and Niccolo is in the middle of it. One of the powerful things that you said about Dorothy Dunnett and about good historical fiction is you can't tell what they make up. So Dorothy Dunnett is so convincing, brings us so beautifully into the time period that we don't know what we're reading is history and what we're reading is novel.
Because we're not historians.
Even if we were even a historian, what she does is she weaves Niccolo in and out of courts and historical events. So you don't it feels like he's actually part of it. And
No
it's
question.
brilliant.
I'm trying to remember whether I like Lyman more or Niccolo more. But anyway,
Well, we could lose another summer by reading them both
I,
again.
it was really, I resented clients calling me when I was busy at work because it was my lunchtime and I wanted to read Dorothy Dunnett.
So I just learned a phrase that turns out it's an old phrase um, in the last week that I think applies to Dorothy Dunnett and this genre. The phrase is competence porn. I think it also applies to The Diplomat and West Wing, which we were talking about as well. Have you heard this phrase, competence porn, before?
Ah,
Was used particularly with like Andy Weir's books, The Martian
right,
and
right,
Hail
right.
Mary, about in a fictional sense, people doing real things really well, and how we are hungry for the idea that there are people who actually get stuff done competently. Hidden Figures is another piece of competence porn, right? That there are the people, that the African American women behind the space program are these underlying people who know what they're doing to make something happen well.
Right.
And and I
Interesting.
think it's a particular antidote to our society right now where we are really concerned that there is nobody who knows what they're doing.
Well, we come to that honestly, given the current government. So,
Well, and I think the space program is an interesting comparison to this. The American space program, the Mercury program, the Apollo program, the Space Shuttle program, often criticized as being too careful as time went on. However, they didn't feel that they had sort of test flights to squander. Think about how many flights, uh, you know, Elon Musk's space program has gone through that have crashed in the process. That there is that the carefulness of doing something competently is now sort of mythological in our world. This idea that people are so careful with time, money, and life that they're actually going to check their work. Well, so I think so too. I think what I would like to close on is uh, a question that you asked, which is uh, whether or not we remember the cliffhanger that entices us to watch or read the next thing. And I think, you said that almost all of your TV shows that you watch now end in
they
cliffhangers.
had their what they call this week the fall finales. And then they take a vacation until after the new year.
and and this is something, obviously it worked with books too, right? All of us were hungry for the next book in the series to come out when we read it, Harry Potter, for example, which, our kids consumed, all the books all at once.
And
And
I
for
read the
those
first one and said, enough.
and for those of us who were waiting, right, from who read year one and then were worried and then had to wait with bated breath. And similar with all the series that our kids read,
And the
the Rick
secret. not only Dorothy Dunn, which were already published, but Outlander.
Right. Yes. So Diana Gabaldon,
Yeah,
her books, we waited for
we're
years.
waiting for them. Yeah.
Or George R. R. Martin, for those of us who are Game of Thrones fans, which will never be done. You know, most of us read Tolkien all at once, but I can't imagine what it was like to have to wait for the
But
Two
I
Towers
watched
to come
Game of
out.
Thrones 8. Were there 8
There were
episodes?
too many seasons.
Yeah, I watched them all in 2 months, so that'll tell you what I was doing. So anyway,
But I
I
think I think what's very interesting now is that our son, Jude, when a new book comes out in a series, he will reread the entire series. And now, we can rewatch everything. But there was a time where we couldn't do that.
well,
And
I'm ready to reread now that we've talked about Dorothy Dunn, and I'm thinking, should I go back? Or
it's
Robert Davies, who's another person we'll talk about, and in another podcast. I
okay.
do. I want to just remind people that they should read Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. It's a great book. It happened last year, but don't
Okay.
forget.
So let's talk next time. Our teaser for next time is, can I manage to read Tom Lake by Ann Patchett between now and our next podcast?
Well, I don't think you're going to like it.
Why not?
Uh, I think it's okay. You could try it. I
Oh,
loved it.
or is there another recent book? You've recommended a bunch of things to me
I
that
thought
I
you
must read.
Known World, The Known World by
Okay.
Edward P. Jones. That's really more important.
Okay, so I'm gonna read The Known World for next time, and then we're gonna
Okay,
come up with an old book that we're also gonna talk about. So
okay, that's good.
that's for next time. Thank you all for listening to Grumpy Clues Who Read. Hopefully we weren't too grumpy. We'll make sure that we have something that we're grumpy about and something that we're happy about for next time, in addition to an old book and a new book. It's gonna be like, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, only on the podcast. Anyway, hoping all of you have a wonderful, whatever time this is, week, and we look forward to seeing you, hearing you, talking about you at our next episode.